Hi, everybody. It's great to see you here. We have a really exciting program for you today. I'm Martha Seelman. I'm the Executive Director of Studio Art Quilt Associates. We are often known by our acronym SAQA. And before we get started with our program, I wanted to give you a little preview of our upcoming benefit auction. This will be our 18th year of running this benefit auction. It's run completely online on the internet. And this year we have more than 440 gorgeous pieces of art available for purchase. And you can see them on the SAQA website, but we wanted to give you a little preview right now. So here we go. So that's just some of the wonderful pieces that will be up for auction starting on September 13th. If you go to www.saqa.com/auction, you can see all of the pieces and read about how the auction works, because it's a reverse auction. So the prices start high and go down, down, down over time. Which is a little bit different. So do read through the frequently asked questions so that you're ready to bid on September 13th. So today's program is what I'm really excited about. Jamie Chalmers is known as Mr. Cross Stitch. He also says he's known as the kingpin of contemporary embroidery. And when I first found out about him, I thought, well, cross stitch, while it's quilt adjacent, doesn't have that much overlap. But then I started following his newsletter, and I got a copy of his book, which is now out of print, but still available through Amazon occasionally, called Push Stitchery, which looked at 30 contemporary stitch artists. And boy, was I sold. So he has been showcasing new talent in the world of needlework and textile art since 2008. He has curated a number of exhibitions in the UK and Ireland. He is the founder of Cross Stitch, a cross stitch design magazine that's a little bit different than your grandmother's cross stitch. And he's also the host of Needle Exchange, a podcast dedicated to conversations on the art of thread. And if you are a podcast listener, this is a podcast that you definitely don't want to miss, because he has a wonderful number of guests that he's interviewing, and he's just a delightful personality to listen to talk about art and stitch. And we'll put up the links in the chat momentarily. So because he's in the UK, the time difference made it impossible for him to be here in person. So this is a pre-recorded presentation that he did for us. If you have questions, the best way to reach Jamie is to direct message him through Instagram, and we'll put that link up in the chat as well. And with a podcast name and everything else. All the information will pop up in the chat while we're watching this presentation of Jamie Chalmers talking about the art of stitch.
Hello everybody, my name's Jamie Chalmers. I'm known as Mr. X Stitch. Thanks for being here for my talk, The View from the Cutting and Stitching Edge, in which I will dazzle you with a fine array of contemporary embroidery and needlework that will leave you gasping. Now, you can take notes if you want to. This is going to be fairly fast and fairly furious. There will be a bit of kind of racy content. There will be a little bit of swearing. That would just be the content rather than me, but we're going to go for it. Feel free to take regular breaks and stretch if you need to. And if you've got any questions at the end, if you leave them with the guys, they will get back to me. I will gladly respond to you. This is the first cross stitch that I did as an adult, probably about 18 years ago now. I was going on a long haul flight to Canada and I wanted something to do on the plane. And I walked into a haberdashery shop and I saw this piece and I thought, that'd be funny. Imagine a man of my size doing some cross stitch. Imagine what people will think. That sponsoring thought was enough to keep me going. And so I decided to have the piece, take it away with me. And once I actually started getting into the stitching of it, I kind of fell in love with cross stitch. Now, I'll point out to you, for those eagle-eyed viewers, I did in fact get a couple of the colors wrong here. If you look at the bottom of the hair, it's nicely balayaged accidentally. And that color is where her eyebrows and eyelids should be, where she's got a sort of funny dramatic eye effect going on. But you know, it was the first one. It took me about 2 years to do it. I framed it, I stitched it with pleasure, learned a lot along the way, and then gave it to my mum. But being a young man in my 30s, I didn't really want to do too many more designs like this. I did a geisha girl, I did a few other things, and then I discovered a piece of software called PC Stitch, which meant I could make my own cross stitch patterns. And so I started doing graffiti cross stitch patterns instead. I did this piece again, black fabric, completely pink background. Took me quite a few years, but at last I was like, there's something that I can do that sort of reflects my tastes. And it was very freeing to be able to do that, because I do like kittens and I do like country cottages, but I don't really feel the need to cross stitch them myself. I spent some time tinkering around with designs. I decided to open a shop in Etsy in about 2006. I've still had a ridiculously low number of sales off of that shop, but I played around with things. I did a few designs. I made this one based on Wolverine, and then realized that these kind of things, these companies have big legal departments and I don't. So I decided not to pursue that. I did some sports cars, And around the same time as doing this, I decided to start a blog, which I called Mr. X Stitch. And rather than well, I sort of talked about my own work for a little bit, but after a while started focusing on needlework from other people and discovered that there was a whole world out there waiting to happen. And because I was showing things that were rude, that were kind of funny, sometimes there was like, yeah, not safe for work content, but also just kind of edgy stuff that I was interested in. It didn't take too long for me to kind of get sort of craft famous, I guess, off of the back of this. I did that piece based on the work of Shepherd Fairy. That one drove me mad. Several of my pieces have driven me mad, seems to be a theme. But yeah, so around that time, it's about 2011, I applied to go on a television show in the UK, and that was an interesting experience, but again, notched me up another level. This was an appearance that I made on BBC Radio 4 on a Saturday morning show in the UK, which was it was great. This was about 5 years ago now, I think, or something, but it was fun because I was really nervous. And sometimes, you do these things after a while, you don't get kind of nervous. With that one, I had to have a little word myself in the toilets before I went home, keep cool, Jamie, and all that sort of thing. I've been on the telly in the UK a couple of times. The UK has a funny relationship with craft TV shows. There don't seem to be as many as you would think there ought to be. So I still stand ready to take it on should the need be. But I did some work. We taught some workshops at the Royal School of Needlework. So I got to be described as a visiting lecturer at the Royal School of Needlework. So that was quite fancy. And I've been on the telly a couple of times, but there's been various other aspects to the stuff that I've done. So I've been involved in quite a few craftivism projects, which is the idea of activism through craft, something that we'll explore a little bit later as well. This was a project I did called Stitch for Syria, where I invited people to cross-stitch some of those Lebanese designs, and we put them all together onto some wall hangings and took them to Beirut. And we got to visit a city where, sorry, a project where women, Syrian refugees, Lebanese women could learn needlework and kind of just get time away from their lives, just earn a bit of money doing it, but also build friendships. And we were able to give them this big outpouring of love, these colorful blankets that we stuck up on the walls. And it was a really amazing thing to go to somewhere so very different from the UK and to have conversations with these ladies about what it was like when you're really enjoying doing some stitching and you look at your clock and it's like 1:30 in the morning, but you're like, oh, I really just want to finish that piece. And I've had other adventures in the world of craftivism as well. And it just reminds me of like the universality of needlework and how much needlework is a part of so many different cultures. And it's such an amazing connection to have. Now, I describe myself as a man-broiderer. When several of us man-broiderers get together, we have a habit of doing dramatic poses. It's a thing that we do. Pay attention to the guy in the middle in the purple shirt because he will come up in the conversation later. But man-broidery is like it's just a marketing tool, really. At the end of the day, we're all crafters and we're all stitchers. And although there is this issue of like the gender story that goes along with needlework, most of us just recognize that it's a lovely thing to do. If you're a man, you do have to go through a certain journey, I think, when you're doing something a bit unusual like needlework, but it would be the same for a female blacksmith. And I think in this day and age, we like to think things are a lot more fluid, so we don't get too hung up on that. I consider myself a curator these days, and I've had the opportunity to curate some exhibitions. This one was at the first British Textile Biennial, which was in 2017 up in Burnley. And I just love the fact that cross stitch in particular, this was called the Mr. X Stitch Guide to Cross Stitch, had pieces from the Royal School of Needlework from the 18th century and then really modern designs from now that covered a lot of sensitive and important topics. And it's just, I love being able to show this stuff to people because there is this concept of what needlework can be. And yet I know that it's vibrant and dynamic and interesting. And so it's great to be able to share that work with people. I've taught workshops all over the world. I say that I've taught workshops in 2 countries, England and America, but technically all over the world. Check out the guy in the t-shirt who's standing next to the table. His name's Keith. He looks like he died and somehow I caught a ghost on camera, but we'll get back to Keith's work a bit later because he's also a cross stitcher. But I love teaching workshops. I love that moment where it just kind of clicks. I've taught classes full of rowdy teenagers and the room's gone silent in the end because they're engaged in needlework. I've taught people of all ages. Absolutely love it. It's a complete honor. And then I've also been able to do some interactive projects as well. So this was at the second British Textile Biennial where we did a project called Stitch Your Story, where people were invited to stitch how we say, it's like examples of where they lived and tell stories about them. And we made this installation that was inside Blackburn Cathedral, and people could sit inside the space and see the pieces moving around, and you got to understand the stories of where people came from, the things that were important to them that they decided to stitch, all in this really lovely space where the pieces were kind of moving and drifting with the wind. So I love those kind of opportunities as well. I am a published author. Yes, thanks very much. When I'm an author, I talk in this voice. But this is the Mr. X Stitch Guide to Cross Stitch, available from Amazon and all good charity shops. It's my love letter to craft that I love, I would say. It teaches you how to cross stitch, tells you why you should cross stitch, covers topics like glow in the dark thread, talks about mindfulness and all the kind of stuff that is important to me as a stitcher. It's also got some pretty nice designs. Kind of surprised myself with my design skills in that book. I'd like to think I'll do another book somewhere down the line, but if I don't, I'm happy. This is my book. It's still available. You can go and get it. And then since 2017 as well, I've been producing what I like to call the world's best contemporary cross stitch magazine, X Stitch. We are issue 27 has just come out now. It's a digital magazine. It's a contemporary magazine. We have themed issues. And what I do is I put forward a theme, so space or beats or love or food, and I invite designers from around the world to respond to those themes, and then we can pull together an eclectic mix of designs. So instead of it just being one set of designs and one set of styles, you know, I've got a cadre of about 90 different designers from about 19 different countries around the world. So we've had issues like the myths and legends issue, where people stitched myths from their countries or rather designed them, and so you get this story about different myths that you may have heard from Russia or Cyprus or France in the mix. And so I just try and make it something modern and give you the opportunity to cross stitch designs that you'd be proud to show on your walls. And it's an absolute pleasure. I've worked with some fantastic designers. The magazine is still going now. We're about to enter a really interesting phase of the magazine where I'm hoping we can take it to the next level. And it's a magazine I wish that was there when I started cross stitching all those years ago. So I'm really proud to make it available to people now. Like and subscribe, everybody, if you want to. You can find it on xstitchmag.com. And while you're liking and subscribing, I also host a podcast called Needle Exchange. Issue 50 came out, it comes out the week after I'm recording this. So it comes out just in the middle of July, start of August. And I have long form conversations with needlework and textile artists. We talk about all kinds of subjects, and I've had some really interesting conversations already. What's been great is I've been doing this stuff since 2008, and finally now I get to have long conversations with people that I've wanted to talk about for ages. So it's just been really rewarding. And you know, I'm not an artist, but I've had conversations with enough artists. I love the opportunity to talk about their creative process and about the things that gets in the way, you know, and how they go from starting out doing a humble cross stitch to doing something like this. This is by Ana Teresa Barbosa. She's an artist from Peru, and this is one of my all-time favorite pieces of all time. Pencil work alongside needlework. There's a real power to the piece, and I think it's just a great example of what's possible out there. You know, I've been showing this stuff and featuring this stuff since 2008, and thanks to the rise of social media, there's just more and more people who are interested in this now, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to share work from around the world. Did you hear the one about the artist Lucy Sparrow, who created an entire pharmacy out of felted items? She's also done supermarkets, she's done adult shops, she's done corner shops. Lucy, if you find her, Sow Your Soul on Instagram, she's felting everything. She's an absolute phenomenon. I absolutely love it. And she just keeps doing, yeah, you know, like in Florida, I'm pretty sure she did a Whole Food store and every single item was made of felt, most of them with little smiley faces on them. You can just go and buy them. It's absolutely brilliant. I love seeing her. She's sort of super genius, to be honest. And this is the thing with my website, we don't just do cross stitch. What we don't do is we don't do dressmaking, and we don't tend to do knitting, but we do kind of everything in between. So here we've got some nice machine embroidery. This is by Oliver Bliss, who did a Soft Lad series of tapestries, exploring the difference between social media images of people and the reality about the modern manhood. And he would have the stories of the people that he sort of encountered, do these images of them, but tell the truth about them behind the scenes. And again, it can often be a great tool for exploring issues that are personal to people, you know, things that come from within, stories that you want to tell. And in this case, then recreate using machine embroidery. Tilika Schwartz. Uh, so on this piece, there's a dinosaur down there saying, "I'll see what I can do." And I'm proud to say that that is me being quoted in one of Tilika's work. Her work's kind of like free form, crazy jazz. Needlework, all kinds of types in there, quotes, images. I absolutely love seeing her work. I had the pleasure of exhibiting some of it in 2011. And I would sit there for a good 10 minutes before the show opened, looking at all the little details that she has in there. Because this creativity comes in so many different directions, and it just so happens that it's all with a needle and thread and something that's been going on for like thousands of years. Gold work, the finest of fine needleworks, you know, the work that you get from the Royal School of Needlework, and then people like Akumi Sakata, absolutely beautiful stump work, raised pieces. But what I love is you get these things, you will get things that are done for the king, King Charles, long live the king. And then you'll get pieces like this, which are the same standard, but just a little bit weird. And I'm not going to lie, I like things when they're a little bit weird. Lace. I had a column on my website for several years called Adventures in Time and Lace. Absolutely love lace. I'm fascinated by the local geography of it and how you get these small versions of lace, a bit like local dialects that are very specific to areas. And then you get artists like Penny Nichols from Portland who decides to go and put some scorpions on it. Or she did another piece that was to do with Scott of the Antarctic and the boat that he sailed on. You get these really contemporary concepts being applied to these traditional mediums to just remind us how valid and important they are. Also, I think lace is very much like localized throwing. If you do it with bobbin lace, I've seen ladies who can like throw a bobbin a quarter of an inch with unerring accuracy. Makes me think I don't really want to play them at tiddlywinks, if I'm honest. But I absolutely love lace. I've got loads of time for that. And then as the world turns, we do find now that needlework gets to become more of a valid tool for like political discourse and for social discourse. Enika Jones's work is absolutely fantastic, and she, quite rightfully, along with a lot of BIPOC artists, is using this medium as a way of exploring their own experiences in the world. I recently did a needle exchange with an artist called Marcia Bennett Mayle, who her pieces equally so explore her experiences as a Black woman in a modern context. And I think it's just a great opportunity to have these conversations, but the medium of needlework makes it almost acceptable for people. It removes one of these barriers. Come back to cross stitch for a little bit. It's where I started. I'm sure the hip hop fans of you in the audience will recognize Tupac and Biggie, and I'm sure you've got your opinions on which artist suits you best. But if I need to impress a bunch of kids about a bit of needlework, this is about as good as it gets, because cross stitch, you know, it was invented 500, 700 years ago, and yet it still remains something that can be kept fresh and interesting. Brenner Hearn is a gay man who's been living the life of a gay man who was 50 in 2014. You know, he's born in the 60s. He's gone through a lot of stuff to firm up his identity. And he does these large scale embroidered sampled pieces that explore his experiences, you know, the way he was considered when he was younger and the way society kind of looked at it. And I find that interesting. You know, we as men who stitch are told that it's an unusual kind of thing, and so you get used to challenging the stories that you're told. Bren does a great job of exploring his own relationship to those stories in that work. I was very excited the first time I ever came across Alicia Ross's work, her use of negative space, sexually charged imagery, all of those kind of threads dotting around. It's again super exciting. I still to this day, I see people who are doing new and interesting things with needlework just when I think that maybe I've seen it all because I've been around for so many years. Diane Mayer, absolutely amazing. She takes photographs of areas and then kind of obfuscates parts of them with cross stitch that not only kind of fits completely within the space, you know, she matches the colors, she matches the dimensions, but she almost like puts these into dimensions in there. You know, this piece will have been of the Berlin Wall, and the bit that she stitched would have looked at like the Berlin Wall in the photograph, and she dissolved the wall so that you can see through it. Super clever work. And speaking of clever work, Tom Katsumi. Once upon a time, I did a piece called Killers, which involved red, green, and blue, and I felt very satisfied because it had that old school television look about it. And then Tom Katsumi casually came along and made Marilyn Monroe out of it, using three colors, knocked the ball out of the park. He consistently does this. I love him, and I'm equally annoyed by him. I have these situations sometimes where I'll have an idea in cross stitch, and then someone will come along like Tom, who does it so much better than I ever could. And I just think, well, I'll just get my coat. I mean, I'm quite glad I got here first, to be honest. If I was like 15th to market, I'd just give up now and go and do some flower arranging instead or something. But such a simple idea, executed so well by Tom. God bless him. He's still doing new and interesting things. I hope you're sitting comfortably, about a third of the way through, still going. Now, stitch fight this is to me the only cross stitch in the entire thing, because if you look at the word Alex, you can see that the stitches are horizontal and vertical, whereas all the other stitches in cross stitch tend to be on the diagonal, which to me feels like more like X stitch. But here's an interesting idea that I just don't see people doing very often, is just rotating your cross stitch canvas by 45 degrees, stitching it in little crosses like this. Could be a new market out there, people, if you want to emblazon yourself as an artist in a different direction. Have at that. Have at it. Now, Keith, remember him from earlier? I was doing a workshop. Keith looked like a ghost. Keith stitches onto vinyl, and in this instance, a piece that I exhibited at the Textile Biennial, the entire cast of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Portraits stitched onto vinyl, stitched onto clothing. Absolutely fantastic. He does heavyweight wrestling belts. He does all kinds of things. He did a really cool design in one of the issues of my magazine called Rap Map, which was just a map of New York and the boroughs where your favorite hip hop artists came from. I'm sure those of you that appreciated Tupac and Biggie earlier, take a note of that one. Issue 2, Beats, very good. And then also Lord Libidan. Lord Libidan, like, so I might be like the Batman. No, sorry, I might be like the Superman of cross stitch, and Lord Libidan is the Batman of cross stitch, because he is the guy who knows everything about cross stitch. His website is a fantastic resource, all kinds of bits of information. He always makes super intelligent designs, transformers made out of plastic canvas that actually transform, small video games. Lord Libidan writes column for the magazine. Like I say, thankfully I'm Superman, so he can't stop me, but he's a clever so-and-so. And he was the guy in the purple. When I said, look out for those people in the purple, the 3 posing man embroiderers, Lord Libidan there for you. But as you said, cross stitch has this thing of being safe and secure, but it can also be used to explore topics like the migrant crisis and the way we consider refugees. Tanya Buchal's work looks at migrant centers, captures images of refugees that we've become kind of desensitized to because of the nature of the modern news cycle. But by capturing them in cross stitch, it makes us reconsider those people. And I think there's definite use of the tool of cross stitch as a soft way of exploring sensitive topics. It's a really useful tool that gets used again and again. And I think there'll be more of this coming up. Alternatively, why not just cross stitch on some skateboards? And Only My Art has done all kinds of, like, I want to say left field approaches to cross stitch. This stuff's quite mellow. He's also did a project which actually isn't as rude as it seems, but taking images from adult magazines and then cross stitching clothes on the ladies, which is actually quite a nice service. And Only's got a great punk attitude towards the designs that he does. Really clever work. Absolutely love it. Now, Theo Humphreys goes by the name of Crapistry, and what he does is he hacks Vervico cushion covers from the 1970s. He takes the designs and then he repurposes them. This is one of the Blad Kitty collection. It's called Bleach. I've got a design of his that was originally set out as a beach scene, a desert island, but he's put a plane crash in the background and there's a guy lying on the beach. He takes the designs, he hacks them, he manages to keep the images within the same context that they were already designed for. Look out for him. It's super clever work and absolutely disgraceful as well. There's an image of a dog receiving a lethal injection that's just it's perfectly fine, but you know, there's some subjects you just can't do. Here's Tom Katsumi again. I mentioned Tom earlier. Lovely guy. The first issue of the magazine that came out, the theme was revolution. And we decided to do, we're changing everything. We're going to do all this new stuff. We've got 2 cross-stitch cat designs in the revolution issue, which just goes to show that you can't get away from cross-stitch cats, whether you like it or not. Tom, though, not satisfied with just doing cross-stitch cats, offers up the opportunity to make your own cross-stitched animation of a cat using a zoetrope technique. So yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to, you can make your own cross-stitched animation. Cross-stitch animations do come along from time to time. There's a lot of work involved. Obviously, this one's only got about 16 frames, so it's not too bad, really. Whereas there are other artists who do a lot more work. Now, the next person, if memory serves, this animation doesn't work. I think it was meant to, but Juliet from Poignet and More She did an animation that had 117 pieces of it, and 97 people contributed to it from around the world. And this duck would like dance and move around. If you find her on Instagram, you'll see that she's done 3 more projects. And the current one, Project Karma, is something that I've taken part in, which is the Dancing Squid one, which I think is going to have something like 350 people taking part in it. And they all stitch the same piece to the same size hoop, a variation on it. And then she animates the whole thing. It's absolutely fantastic. And then just to really round the animation off, we've got Aubrey Longley Cook's animation of RuPaul that he did about 10 years ago, I want to say now. He had these frames and he invited the 35 designers to stitch them in whatever colors they chose, as long as they kind of kept to the pattern. Then he animated it all together and then created something as beautifully hypnotic as it is dreadfully, it really is an assault on the senses. We had this in the textile biennial, and sometimes we would have to prod people because they've been staring at it for 2 minutes and were starting to kind of dribble out of their mouths. We're like, okay. Now then, glow in the dark thread looks like white thread, but it glows in the dark. Now, back in the day when I did a lot of stitching, I always used to, instead of throwing my threads on the floor, I'd often eat them because I felt that was tidier. It never occurred to me to put them in a bin. But when I started using glow in the dark thread, I decided not to do that just in case I gave myself an ulcer. But what I love about glow in the dark thread is that you can use it to have tricks. So this is from my book. And as you can see, the glow in the dark makes the lights come on in the Empire State Building. You can hide hidden messages in them. Stitch Fight from earlier, the only person that did the entire cross stitch design, she did this piece. Nice and simple execution there. And she's also done a glow in the dark Spider-Man. Excuse me. And there are a few other people that have taken similar ideas. It's a fantastic tool for hiding hidden messages because you can make them white. I often think it'd be lovely to do a sort of cloud-based design that I would put up in my children's bedroom. And then when the lights go out, it would say, "Obey your mother," in block capitals, just to kind of get the message across. But there's tons of stuff that you can do. If you use your imagination, if your imagination is weird enough, you can pull off some real blinders with the glow in the dark thread. So speaking of weird, depending on what mood I'm in, Frederique Morel's piece either appeals to me or doesn't appeal to me. She does a lot of work of almost appliquing vintage French needleworks onto objects. And this piece is quite old now. This piece was probably about 10 years ago. And to be honest, I absolutely love it. I'd have it in the hallway of X-Stitch Towers in a heartbeat. But she's done many other objects and they've slowly got weirder and weirder over the years as this concept has been sort of played out. There's another artist whose name escapes me right now who does a similar thing, telephones, drills covered in fabric like this. It's a great idea and a really nice play on kind of hard and soft, but I think you have to go gaudy with it. DM Chow uses pieces of porcelain in her work. So this piece is stitched onto gossamer, which is then laid over the plate, and it's tiny, tiny details. I mean, I exhibited some of her work, and that is literally like teacup size, a kind of UK teacup size, which is how we measure things around here. Absolutely beautiful, detailed work, sometimes playing with the format and playing with the form. On the other hand, why not go and cross stitch on top of a car bonnet? Severia from Lithuania is renowned for these kind of pieces of work. Sometimes I would show this piece of work and say, I mean, I've exhibited this piece of work and people would ask whether the stuff gets dirty when you're driving. And I would have to explain to them the concept of art and how you wouldn't actually have your car like this. But at the same time, I would say to children, why don't you try stitching on your dad's car? See how he feels about it. This is her interpretation of Pimp My Ride. It's called Way of Roses. It was kind of feminization of car modification. Absolutely love it. Severia can't do any wrong. Now, a little while ago, I discovered that unfortunately Harriet Hamill was no longer with us, but nonetheless, her Soft Zuki is such a fantastic piece of work. Even that man riding that bicycle is about to fall off because he can't believe his eyes. I do like a bit of soft sculpture. There's something about soft versions of solid objects that really appeals to me, whether it's needle felted axes, any of these kind of things. There's a fine line between plush toys. Harriet once made a soft version of a kebab shop, gyro shop, with gyros and salads in soft bowls and all those kind of things. If you can think about it, you can make soft versions of anything. Holly Level here, full of British nostalgia here with her stitched pieces. And there's no reason why you can't recreate, as Lucy Sparrow's done, pretty much anything in these kind of formats if you want. It's a nice way of kind of documenting parts of life. And that to me is one of the things I also love about needlework. Needlework takes time. So if you're going to spend time making things, you may as well make things that are profound and have meaning. This is the COVID Chronicle. Now, this was a collaborative project founded by Wendy Bliss, contains 140 panels and is 36 meters in length, and is a collective expression of the effect of the pandemic on people around the world. It's funny how, despite the effects of the pandemic, for some of us, it now starts to feel a bit like a fever dream. And that's what makes this piece of work particularly important, because it just reminds us of how it affected people. And at the same time, acted as somewhat of a therapeutic tool for people as they were able to express and possibly process their own experiences as they went through and reflected upon what happened during this time. On a similar vein, but different, the Tiny Pricks project by Diana Weimar. Now, the curious thing here is, at the time of recording, there's a risk that this project might have to continue, which would be very depressing. But she had a crowdsourced project where people would stitch quotes from Donald Trump. And the stuff that he said, for better or worse, a lot of the time people took inspiration from it, for better or worse. And so people just stitched his quotes, and the project goes on. Diana's got a book that's coming out very soon looking at this. Again, a useful form of creative therapy for people who found the output of the man to be not to their taste, shall we say. Maruyama Asama does a great job of capturing small vignettes of Japanese life with her machine embroidered applique pieces. This one's hand embroidered. She's got all the skills. But what I love about it is it's a way of capturing slices of life that we would not necessarily see otherwise. And I think that's one of the things that I find charming about needlework, its ability to capture vernaculars. I like a good vernacular. It's the thing that you don't see. It's the way, it's like the visual language of a place, something that people will stitch. And again, they will stitch them because they have value. They will show you the insights into their world, because the tourism brochures might not necessarily pick those kind of things up. Susie Vickery's pieces make icons out of workers. She's lived in Mumbai. She's recently moved back to the UK from there. And she did a whole series of pieces making icons out of the people that she knew, whether it was the wife of the person that ran the laundry, or somebody who is a taxi driver. And she immortalized them using mixed media, and then would give the pieces to them. And they would be blown away, because these are a lot of people in certain cultures who don't have a great sense of value. And yet she was able to immortalize them and make icons out of them, which is just a fantastic gift to be able to give to people. Speaking of vernaculars, Gillian Bates lives down on the south coast of the UK and does a lot of British seaside scenes. She lives in Eastbourne. Eastbourne kind of looks like this. I've got a piece of hers up in my house in Brighton Pier, because that's near where my grandparents lived. And I just love these little moments, you know, the machine embroidery here, applique, capturing things, whether it's bowling greens or a seagull running off with your sandwich or your chips, you know, these little moments that happen around us. And it's just wonderful sometimes when people choose to capture those. Jacqueline Royal finds graffiti and street art in places that are kind of obscure, takes photos of them, and then recreates them in needlepoint. You know, I'm a big fan of street art, and I know that there was a time when it was sometimes considered vandalism, but even art like this, which may not be the most beautiful stuff, still has value for some people. And I love the fact that Jacqueline has chosen to honor that value by producing that work and kind of, yeah, giving us another chance to reappraise it. Now, Yin Zhuchen reminds us about the modern world with her suitcase cities. This is another one of these ones where I've shown these to people and people say, well, I don't understand how you're going to close the suitcase. And I have to explain to them the concept of art once again. But these pieces are very much made of people's recollections of towns. She would say to people, you know, this is the town I'm trying to recreate, tell me about it. And then she would create that using objects and creating soft sculptures as a sort of micro map of the area. And in a similar way, Liz Konecki, who I've interviewed on the Needle Exchange podcast, she creates embroidered maps of areas and then invites people to stitch their narratives onto them, whether it's a local landmark or a good shortcut or a place that has meaning. Liz allows people to create these kind of psychogeographic maps that reflect the voice of a town and the way that they talk about their spaces. And it's a project that I just think everybody should do, because if you want to express joy for where you live, there's no better way to do it. Now, we have had a few experiences of how people can use embroidery to process their own experiences. And Alex Walters is someone who went through that herself while her husband was in the army. She did a series of pieces that explored his relationship to weapons, whether it was this red work handgun. She made a quilt that had a machine gun on it. it was kind of her way of understanding that her husband was in a dangerous situation, and she was able to use the process of stitching as a tool to really reflect on that, a deliberate act of doing that. She also did a series that looked at the prescription medication that she was taking. Noel Mason takes his concept a step further. This piece is called Nothing Much Happened Today for Eric and Dylan. It's a cross-stitch piece that is 50 inches high and 66 inches wide, and it took her 5 years to make. Now, this zoomed in piece gives you a sense of the scale or the detail of the piece, but I'm just going to spin through a couple more images so that you can get a sense of like the larger piece, because it really is a powerful piece, and it's just another one of those examples of how cross-stitch, this very innocent craft form, can be used to explore something really quite powerful. You know, this piece of work has a lot of gravity behind it, and I've seen similar pieces. There was another piece that an artist did exploring the Challenger explosion. Sometimes these things happen and they have a really big impact, and this gives an opportunity for people to think about it, perhaps in a way that is a bit more careful than maybe they were able to do before. Sometimes cross stitch just soften things for us, makes it a little bit more palatable. Marina Bolmini is an Italian designer who explores all kinds of, she has a kind of punk aesthetic. She likes mashing up a lot of designs together to kind of explore sensitive topics. She has a bit of a, I think the American dream does not sit well with Marina, shall we say. That's not to say that she isn't on board, but she can certainly see there are ways of playing around with it. And she does a fantastic job of it with a really good design sensibility. And I do adore her quite a lot. I'm not going to get arguing with you about things, though. If you do want to have a fight, I would encourage you to have a fight in an applique format, as depicted by Emily Eyeball here. This is probably the nicest fight I've ever seen in my life. I think it works really well. I think there's something really dark about Emily's work. Applique, once again, really easy way to explore these things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with getting these things out of your system. You know, I've gone through the stages of grief in my own life, and I cross-stitch some of them. There's denial, anger, negotiation, depression, and acceptance. And by the time I'd finished cross-stitching anger, I kind of felt all right. I didn't need to do the others. There's a lot of power to be said there. Now, this piece by Barbara Randall seems familiar. It's a little bit of a warning. There's some fruity content coming up. So on the next slide, if you've never sworn in your life, I want you to avert your gaze, because there's going to be some slightly fruity language, because needlework can do that sort of thing. You know, needlework helps us to express our own sense of craziness, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. Now, for me, sometimes I catch my toe on a door, and this is pretty much what happens. You know, this is by Lou Trigg. It's done with machine embroidery. It's the only sweary piece I've got. So I'll tell you when you can revert your gaze if you've never sworn. But for as long as there's been art, there's been subversive art. And it's funny that we have such a preconceived idea about needlework that says it shouldn't be rude and it shouldn't be swearing. But for a lot of people, work like this is, it kind of says it's okay for that stuff to happen. It can be an opportunity for people to express themselves in ways through needlework that they didn't think they were allowed to. So it does have a place. And I think we all go through that phase. I'm a bit past that now. I don't feel the need to be that edgy, but definitely for a while, sweary cross stitch was right in my wheelhouse. Embroidery can be all of these things. You know, embroidery, this is woven tapestries by Erin Riley, who does a lot to do with voyeurism and intimacy and personal exploration of herself. Her work is fantastic. These are huge woven rugs, and she makes it look effortless the way she's able to put car crashes, social media images, all kinds of pieces of work into her tapestries. They're really astonishing. Needle lace again. We're back with Pierre Fouché this time, who explored his own experiences as a gay man, focusing on needle lace versions, portraits of gay porn stars, portraits of homosexual icons, using a traditional medium and they're so good. Like the needle lace is so good from a technical standpoint. His work is amazing. Absolutely love it. Now, Leah Emery tells me that this scene is quite rude, and I don't really know. I can't see it myself because I'm young and innocent, but Leah's got an eye for that kind of retro, shall we say, adult material, and expressing that sometimes through cross stitch. Again, an opportunity for some people to get it out of their system, or to make cross stitch that is important to them, in the same way as I did it with street art back in the day. This stuff does happen, and I've seen things in needlework that you wouldn't believe, but I think it needs to exist, and it's we shouldn't deny it. It's not to everybody's taste, but for some people it is. There's a great group called the Profanity Embroidery Group out of Whitstable in Kent. Sweary as anything. Absolutely love it. Erica Hagberg has done many pieces that explore the slightly provocative side of things. As far as I can tell, this guy's just finished a run and someone's just helping him tie his shoelace or something like that. I don't really understand the work, but for as long as there's been rudeness in the world, then it has been expressed through needlework. Did you ever do that thing with like nails and thread where you would kind of wind them round? Now, Dirty Pillows have done plenty of these kind of forms. People tell me that there's something going on in this image. I can't personally see it myself, but I just think the colors are really nice and there's something there about, I don't know, there's some content there somewhere. I think it has a place. It allows people to say that's okay, and needlework can allow people to express themselves no matter how diverse or unusual they are. And I think that to deny that is to deny people the opportunity to express themselves. But I'm not going to lie, I'm no spring chicken these days. So actually, all that talk about rude material has made me feel rather sleepy. Louise Riley, forearms like Popeye, actually stitched these pieces onto mattresses. I've seen them in installation as well, and it's quite impressive. I don't quite know how she did it, but as well as the rude and as well as the angry and as well as the argumentative and the provocative, there's also an opportunity for the peaceful. And the thing about needlework is it is such a lovely thing to do. It creates this inner peace within all of us. You know, it's the thing that I fell in love with, the way it soothes your soul. And so it just gives you an opportunity to relax. And for most people, I think if everybody in the world did a bit of needlework every day, the world would be a better place because it's so meditative, it's so mindful. Joetta Maui's large scale bed piece absolutely hits the spot. I could quite go to sleep right now. I'm not going to. We've still got about 25 slides to go. I hope you're all right. Do you want to have a little stretch for a minute? Should we just do a little bit of stretching just to get back in the room? We're going to run through some really cool stuff now. I often say to people, if you want to make content that's controversial, sometimes people will use the form to be critical of it. If you did something in cross stitch that was a message people didn't like, they might say, oh yeah, but it's done in cross stitch. Charlotte Bailey trained at the Royal School of Needlework. She has got king grade embroidery skills. So when she did a series of pieces looking at eating disorders, you could not fault the technique. You had to be able to say, I'm not comfortable about the content. And I absolutely love that. I think for me personally, I would love to train to do Japanese embroidery so that I can make something that was absolutely unblemished and then do something really rude or really controversial with it. Robert Foreman uses a technique called thread painting where he lays the threads down instead of stitching them, almost like kind of gluing them like you used to do when you were a kid. But Robert takes it to the next level by playing with dimensions and space and illusion in his work. It's a really interesting technique. He takes his time to do them, but when they come out, I often sit there and go, I've got no idea how you've just done that. It's ridiculous. It's been really great lately to see Jan Huling's work kind of explode on Instagram. The beaded work that she does is, you know, it's different. I think it's a different way of using beads. I think it's a different mode of using beads. There's a thing called the Battle of the Beadsmiths that you can see on Facebook where people are creating all kinds of things with beads. And then Jan comes along and just spins it into a different direction and makes it really interesting and exciting. Makes me want to have a go at beading, but I've got a puppy and he'll just be eating beads all day long. But this is the thing that I love about needlework is it just keeps delivering and it keeps delivering unusual things. Iram Yaziki, I only discovered last year, and yet these kind of left field, it's just really unusual worlds that she's creating through her needlework with bright colors. I just fell in love with them pretty much instantly. And every time she posts a new piece of work on Instagram, I'm absolutely in love with it because it's just this creative outpouring, like some kind of portal into a world that she can see inside her head. And yet it doesn't have to be weird. We don't have to have these weird things. Stephanie Kelly Clark does pictures of homes, and I can see how that's done with satin stitch, but I can't tell you how it's done because she makes it look effortless. She's done so many beautiful pictures of houses and scenes of the countryside with simple stitching and use of color and shade. And I'm so jealous because she makes it look so good. It's absolutely wonderful to see. And this is the thing, you can honor anything you want in needlework. Faig Ahmed is an Azerbaijani weaver, and he takes the traditional Azerbaijani rug and explodes it into futuristic directions. I wrote an article about him for Fibre Art Now magazine once, and it was exciting because in the world of homogenization, where every airport looks the same and it looks like shopping centers, Faig was taking this tradition and making you feel excited about it, sending electricity through it, pulling it into different dimensions and just reminding you what a fantastic tradition and how a tradition can exist in the modern world. Jeremy Chase Sanders is synesthetic, and Jeremy has a palette in his head that reflects numbers and letters. So he did a series of fabrics that have got sort of gay slang terms woven into them, bitch, queen, those kind of things, but you'd only know that if you knew the colors inside his head. And I did once ask him if he would weave me some fabric with the words Mr. X stitched through it, and he said it would be $3,500 a yard. And I said, thank you, Jeremy, I will come back to you. And that was about 12 years ago. Moving on. Eliza Bennett. I've shown this piece at several presentations over the years, and it always gets a good gasp out of people. This is called A Woman's Work, and it looks at the price you pay, I guess, for working in the textile industry in certain countries. You know, it's very powerful. I've seen other people who stitched under layers of their skin as well. Eliza's piece, you know, she's not really in any pain, but it's so dramatic. It's such a powerful piece of work. It really is remarkable. I mean, you can have a go at that stuff yourself if you want. Have at it. Zoe Williams. So I exhibited some of these pieces of work at the Knitting and Stitching show once, and I had this piece on the wall, and people would sometimes look round the other side of the wall to see whether there was an entire needle felted rhino on the other side of the wall as well. Zoe's a needle felting artist. She actually sold one of the pieces while I was exhibiting it, and I got a needle felted tentacle that sticks out the wall in my house. Absolutely love Zoe's work. She has lucid dreams and spends a lot of time recreating the people and the animals that she sees in her dreams with needle felting, with beads. Absolutely sublime. Speaking of sublime, Simone Elizabeth Saunders. She calls her work Black Nouveau. And, you know, for me, when I started this presentation, when I started stitching, Art Nouveau, Alphonse Mucha, Simone's work takes this to the next level, puts it onto a modern stage, uses an interesting technique, but also she makes tufted rugs. So not only is the design of this beautiful and is the story of this beautiful, it's also very comfortable if you lie your face against it. Absolutely love Simone's work. It's really brilliant. Deborah Simon made a series called Flayed Bears, where she created these large-scale objects and then kind of removed parts of their skin so we could see beneath them. And I often have to remind myself that these things aren't real. I sometimes wonder with Deborah's work what she does with them. After a while, can you turn it into an occasional table? But her work is beautiful and poignant. And as I say, you look at it and you just have to go, remember that's a model, because it really looks like a bear with bits of its skin removed. Similar but different, Matthew Cox embroiders onto X-rays and creates new narratives for the people whose X-rays he's using. It's a really clever idea, and it's been great to see Matthew's work evolve over the years from quite simple concepts to more distinct ones and kind of working on themes. And I just think it's a really interesting way of doing it. I broke my leg a little while ago and kind of wish I'd kept the X-ray from it just to see what I could do with it. But actually, Matthew's done such a good job. Again, I'll probably just get my coat. There's no point. It's true. I used to go to the Knitting and Stitching show, and there was a stand where a charity had bookcases, and on those bookcases were shelves, and on the shelves there were bottles filled with buttons, and for a certain donation you could sit and pour the buttons into a bowl and sort them all out, and they made thousands of pounds over the course of a weekend because people love buttons. Lisa Kokin loves buttons and does something quite different with them. I love this approach, this kind of top-down art piece of using them in this way, almost like pointillism or something like that. And it's a really interesting use of buttons that maybe I've just triggered a bunch of you there. I do apologize, but you've got the skills. I'm sure you'll be able to make it work. Luke Haynes trained as an architect before moving into art quilts. I've known him for years. I've had a few adventures with him. His art quilts do not disappoint. He's still making them to this day. He's still making really interesting projects with him and his wife. And I just really love his illustrative style of doing this work. You know, just taking those pieces. I mean, you guys know art quilts, okay? You probably know Luke. I probably don't really need to say a heck of a lot more than that. But I like Luke. We go back. We've had adventures. He's a nice guy. He's a nice guy, and he's quite handsome. Very annoying. Anyway, Adriana Pace did a series of pieces where she stitched poetry, but she stitched it using conductive thread. And that meant that if you put your finger near the thread, it would close a circuit. Your electromagnetic field would close a circuit that would then play an MP3 file of the rest of the poem to you. Such a clever idea, such an underused technique. Go and put like conductive thread into your work and make an audio sensual experience for people. Why don't you? Benjamin Shine is a genius. all you have to do is take a piece of toile and creatively iron it, and you can make a picture of Rembrandt. So I think we'll all just go off and do that shortly. His work is amazing. He posts videos on Instagram of doing the work, and I still, again, don't fully understand how he does it. It's so clever. And his work's so beautiful as well. If you've not seen his work, you should go and see it because, again, effortlessly impossible. You know how these things are. Now, I'm pleased to say that I have this piece behind me on the wall by Marlo Stoiker. She was very kind to give it to me. To me, it sums up everything that I love about embroidery and needlework in a kind of one thing. You know, it's got lace, it's got guns, it's got boobs, it's got machine embroidery, it's got flowers, it's just got everything. And it is a constant reminder to me of how needlework can be everything. You know, it is a medium that can be used in whatever way we want, whether we just want to follow a pattern and have a nice time relaxing, enjoying a hobby, or whether we want to pour our souls out and make something special. Ben Venom, I'm imagining you guys have heard of him. Heavy metal quilt t-shirts, such a badass. I got to meet him a little while ago because he did an exhibition in Birmingham, home of British heavy metal. And again, a lovely guy. And this is such a good idea. I'm hoping somewhere down the line to be able to open an art gallery here in the UK. And I really want Ben's work to be one of the first things I show because it just blows the concept away. I'm sure you guys with art quilts have this preconception thrown at you all the time. And I think Ben's just a great way of making people think about it completely differently, blowing their socks off. Because people sometimes still don't understand whether embroidery is art. I made this piece of the Mona Lisa just so I could say to people, look, there you go. I made the Mona Lisa out of cross stitch. Ergo, it must be art. The thing is, it's not about the medium. It's not about what you're making, whether it's sellotaping a banana to a wall or making a dinosaur out of car parts or making the Mona Lisa out of cross stitch. It's not about the tool you're using to make. It's about the thing that you're expressing. It's about the work you're making and the expression of you that is in that work. Go and stitch into a toaster, why don't you? Sarah Greaves did a piece of work where she stitched into a bathtub, and I had that on exhibition once, and people would ask whether the water would fall out of the bathtub, and I'd say, are you that person that asked me whether that carbonic gets dirty earlier? And have to explain to them the concept of art once again. But there's nothing to stop you doing it. There's nothing to stop you trying and exploring. And I'm always fascinated in my conversations on Needle Exchange to understand how people get to a point, how people start off doing a little bit of stitching at home and they end up making space quilts like Jimmy McBride does. Admittedly, he lives on a spaceship. He stitches the things he sees out of his windows. In fairness, Jimmy's now a really excellent clothing maker involved in the film industry. But, you know, we can use needlework to express the farthest reaches of space. We can use it to express political issues. We can use it to express our own sexuality. We can use it to make your mum smile on Mother's Day. You know, you can use it in so many different ways. And if the piece of work that you're making comes from you and is an expression of your soul, then it is art and you are an artist, and that's the end of the story. Case of Valle, absolutely love her work. It speaks to the soul of everything, you know. I'm honored to be able to share work with you to show this kind of stuff because needlework is an amazing tool that can create amazing art. And I know that you're in this realm, and I'm proud to have been able to take you on a whirlwind tour of all this. So thank you for being here. You can find me at the Mr. X Stitch website. You can find my magazine, X Stitch. You can subscribe to my podcast and listen to me blather on and have fascinating conversations with people. But thank you for being here, and I hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks very much.
Ah, thank you, Jamie. What a phenomenal tour of what's happening in stitch and needle arts today. Just amazing. I know that everybody will want to go and watch the recording again. Plus, there's a PDF of the slides that's posted in the chat. So we are just past the top of the hour. If you want to stay online, we're going to show you a few more of the wonderful pieces of art that will be in SAQA's benefit auction starting on September 13th. And we hope that you'll join us here next week to see Stitching Stories, a global craft journey with Isabel Fish of Rue Pigalle, presented by the International Quilt Museum. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. Thank you.